Okay, hello. Welcome to my talk, which is going to be about the future of WordPress is Jamstack. And you might say, what now? And I'm saying, yep, that's what we're going to talk about. So here we go. So just a bit about me. My name is Miriam Schwab. I am currently the co-founder and CEO of Stratic, a relatively new startup in the static WordPress space. Before I founded Stratic, I founded and managed a WordPress development agency. Did that for about 12 years. I've been working with WordPress for about 14 years or more, actually. So been living and breathing this world for a long time. I am a 5-time WordCamp organizer. WordCamps are the WordPress conferences that happen around the world, and I organized 5 of them in Israel. And I've been speaking at many WordCamp conferences and other types of conferences in the web space in Israel and outside of Israel. So let's go back to the beginning of WordPress. In 2003, Matt Mullenweg and Mike Little forked B2, which was a blogging platform, and created WordPress. It was a tiny little platform at the time, but its growth has been tremendous. This is in percentages of the internet. So as you can see, it went from 10%, like let's say around 2010, and up to 40% around now. Why did WordPress experience such tremendous growth? And it's unlike any other platform on the web. First of all, I do think that it's the easy installation. WordPress from the beginning had an easy 5-step installation process, which anyone could do. You didn't have to be too technically oriented in order to use it. It was very easily accessible to all. And then later, of course, hosting companies started having one-click installs, which also, of course, anyone can get up and running with WordPress very quickly. Very easy to use thanks to the WYSIWYG editor and all sorts of functionality that has been added over the years to make content management easy for anyone, regardless of their technical capabilities. A very enthusiastic community, very active and contributing community, including the WordCamps, which I mentioned, which happen regularly every year, including now, even in COVID, but they happen online. And of course, this enthusiastic community contributes to the extensibility of WordPress. I remember when I was getting started with WordPress, I was so excited that I could install a plugin and suddenly have, I don't know, an image gallery or SEO capabilities or all these things, and I didn't have to develop them from scratch. And that gave a lot of power to a lot of people, again, regardless of their technical capabilities. But as WordPress grew, so did issues surrounding it, and particularly as the LAMP platform started to age. We're now talking about WordPress being 17 years in, and pretty much anyone who's used WordPress has experienced one of these issues in some way. So issues related to speed, the LAMP stack, the very architecture is slow. It can be slowed down by a tremendous influx of traffic or even a small influx of traffic. And every page is generated on the fly for the users. So that's a resource intensive and slow process. It's very challenging to get a WordPress site to perform well. Security, between all the layers of this WordPress website, starting from the operating system to the PHP, MySQL, and then WordPress itself. And of course, the many plugins that people install on their sites. On average, there's something like 40 plugins installed on your average WordPress site. That means that you have 40 pieces of code that at any given time can have vulnerabilities. So yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. And then scalability. When a website does experience a lot of traffic, it's very hard to properly provision the resources needed to sustain the site, the server, and often the site can become very slow or even crash just at the very moment when you want your WordPress website to be alive and well because you got a big mention in the media or whatever. So this is just some stats about the speed of WordPress, which has been getting slower over time. And then, of course, some examples of some of the many vulnerabilities. I track WordPress vulnerabilities on an ongoing basis. There's a number every week, and they're generally impacting tens or hundreds of thousands of WordPress websites at a time. So there was this new movement which said, okay, WordPress, you were great, but now let's go back to our origins and create static sites. And when I started building websites, I started with static sites. I would hand code HTML files and FTP them up onto the server. And those were exciting days. It was always fun to see what you created go live, but those sites were very resilient. There wasn't much anyone could do to a collection of static files. And so we're kind of going full circle back to that way of building websites, but of course in a much more sophisticated fashion, where you have a build process that generates from a templating system of some kind the static files and then deploys them through the cloud. So instead of the way that I used to do it, where I would have to update every file or do some kind of process across them and hope it worked out, this is a much more sophisticated way of building sites that are fast, basically unhackable because there's nothing to hack there, and very reliable and resilient. So that sounds awesome. When I started to look into it while I was still building WordPress websites, I was very excited by this because to me it was like all the things that WordPress couldn't do for me and our clients and my agency. And also you have so many options, right? These are like some of the options for headless CMSs that you can integrate. This also reminds me of the old days when PHP applications were being developed and released all the time, like open source ones. So you have so much exciting. And you can customize it to your needs with all these different tooling and put it together in the way that makes sense for you and your customers. So you're not stuck with like one approach. So that sounds very appealing and very flexible and customizable. And it would seem like all our problems are solved. But are they? WordPress continues to grow despite this trend of the static site generators. It's now almost 40% of the internet, and nothing comes close to it. The static site generation and Jamstack trend is certainly gaining hold and gaining in popularity. But despite that, WordPress over the last few months has grown tremendously. Like we're talking about like 2% month over month. I think it was over a very short period of time, which is bigger than even the next largest platform. And I think that one of the reasons that WordPress continues to be popular is because on the one hand, it's this dreaded monolith, which people talk about as being a very terrible concept. But on the other hand, when you're putting together all these different parts, you end up kind of with a tangled mess. And I've been speaking to Jamstack builders, and they talk to me about how something might fail, and then they can't always figure out what is failing because there's so many moving parts and so many things that they've been patching together to make this site work, and often recreating things that are very easy to do out of the box with WordPress. So why does WordPress continue to grow and continue to be used? End users, who are the ones who are using these websites on a daily basis or on a regular basis and are not technically oriented, feel much more comfortable with it. Often with a Jamstack site, they end up having to be very dependent on developers or technical resources in order to get their job done. Whereas with WordPress, they can do things very quickly and very easily on their own. It's highly portable. They can move around from different servers and different providers. It's easy to get up and running. Whereas with Jamstack, the build of a new Jamstack site can be quite complex and quite expensive. And it gives the marketers and business teams power because of the integrations that exist around WordPress that are easy to just implement and get going. And WordPress just is really good at what it does, which is content management. It's its strength. After being around for 17 years and the community input into it, it's just really good at it. You've got user management, you've got previews, you've got drafts, you've got all sorts of workflows in there, and of course, the plugin ecosystem. And you end up with one CMS to rule them all. You have one installation, which is this dreaded monolith, but on the other hand, it means that it's much easier to maintain and use and be understood by these end users. So is WordPress doing okay then if it's if it continues to grow? Nope. In a recent survey, in the part about most loved, dreaded, and wanted platforms, it's the most dreaded. So by developers. And that's not very good. Developers are very important because they influence tool adoption. So that's what brings us to Jamstack WordPress. What? That is so weird, but it is possible. And there's a lot of movement within the WordPress space to make this work. So we have the REST API project, WP GraphQL. There's a new solution called Frontity, which allows you to build a React front-end theme for WordPress rather than PHP-based theme. And then there's static and headless WordPress. There's some plugins that do that. And then of course there's Static, where you can use WordPress as usual and click a button and get this ultimate static output. So that makes marketers happy because they don't have to learn anything new. The website is as they're used to. They click a button and then a site that's fast, secure, and scalable, gets delivered to the internet, and no configurations needed. The challenges with adopting headless and static approaches in the WordPress community are that we've been doing things for a long time in a particular way. Educating the market and creating awareness is a big job. People don't even know to look for it. We need to encourage plugin developers and theme developers to make things that are static ready. And we need to make other alternatives to doing things so that they are static ready. It's a growing trend and catching on though. Definitely, you can see by the number of talks given at conferences in the WordPress space. And I'll leave you with this. This comic is basically saying that WordPress is the future because of its growth, despite what developers might want. So maybe the future of Jamstack is WordPress. Now I'm going to duck and I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye. Thank you.